Well, I would like to welcome our audience to our panel, Getting Organized, How to Create Inclusive Communities. So this panel is our last presentation of our celebration of Constitution Month here at James Madison's Montpelier. And we are really excited to close out this amazing month of programming with this panel, talking about the ideas of community organizing, civic engagement, democratization of art and history, and these ideas of creating healthy, inclusive communities and how people just like us are shaping their communities through art, engagement, working with the youth, working with cultural resources. So I'm really excited for this conversation. My name is Mary Furlong Minkoff. I'm the Assistant Director of Archaeology and Curator of Archaeological Collections at James Madison's Montpelier. And I'm going to serve as your moderator today. And I am really excited to have an amazing set of panelists with us today. So our first panelist is Justin Reed. He's the Director of Community Initiatives for Virginia Humanities. And there he helps lead the statewide engagement, partnership building, and the General Assembly of African American Cultural Task Force. He previously worked for the Mountain Museum and National Historic Landmark in his hometown of Farmville, Virginia, where he and his family were litigants in the US Supreme Court decision outlining local massive resistance to school desegregation. In 2013, he oversaw the opening of Mountain's national award-winning permanent exhibition on the civil rights era student activism. And he's the co-founder of William and Mary's Lemon Project on Race, Public History, and Memory, and a board member of the Center for Nonprofit Excellence and Virginia Tourism Corporation. Our next panelist, Danny Rivera, is the founder of Just Orange. As an Orange County resident, wife, mother, and community organizer, Danny founded the youth civic group Just Orange, which was formulated in October of 2020. Through the last 2.5 years, she's organized multiple voter registration drives featuring the youth of Orange County alongside local, state, and federal elected leaders, such as the mayor of Orange, the delegate for District 30, and Congresswoman for Virginia District 7, as well as the former Attorney General of Virginia. Her vision and mission are all about getting young people engaged and excited to be active members of their community. With youth ambassadors, starting as young as 5th grade, the ultimate goal is to inspire and educate young people how community works, all the way through the age of 17, will they become eligible to register to vote. So really taking them through that important transition period. She works as a benefits program specialist at the Albemarle Department of Social Services and has over 20 years of experience as an advocate for the healthcare field. She's an active member of the community, and she was recently appointed to District 3, the Orange County representative of the Youth Commission. And she's a team member on multiple projects with different community groups and entities, such as the Orange Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club of Orange, James Madison's Montpelier. I will throw in also working with the Orange County African American Historical Society, and much, much more. We are really excited because her energy and her ability to foster and nurture young people already has had such an impact in the local community. And as a resident of Orange, it's been really exciting to see. Our final panelist is Anna Pillow. Anna is the director of the Art Center in Orange. She was born and raised in rural Virginia and is now serving as the executive director here. She holds a MA in Eastern Asian Art from Sotheby's Institute in London and earned her BFA in painting from Old Dominion University. And she believes that supporting artists is crucial for thriving, resilient communities. She's worked internationally with artists, institutions, and galleries, including the Japanese Living National Treasures, the Takashi Murakami. Oh, I'm gonna not do great with all of these. The Iwiwi the Sculptural Center and the Park Avenue Armory, the Chamber's Fine Art, and the Asia House UK, among others. She's an artist who works with porcelain to create objects that celebrate the beauty of everyday life. And for those of you who aren't local to Orange, the Orange Art Center is just really such an anchor to the community here, and has been for decades. So I am so excited to have this conversation and talk with our panelists here. For the audience, if you have questions, we are going to have time for questions at the end of the program. So feel free to put any of your questions in the chat, and we will definitely work those in. But to get us started, this panel is part of the celebration of Montpelier's Constitution Month. So let's start with the Constitution. How does the Constitution affect you, the work you do, and the communities you work with? And Danny, I'm going to start with you because you're center on my screen.
All right. Oh gosh, so the Constitution, absolutely. We wouldn't be able to do what we do as a civic group without the Constitution, without the Bill of Rights, without our right to assemble and to gather, and our freedom of speech. So that is obviously for any, I feel like for any American, the staple of the way that we're able to move throughout our society and our communities. So I really lean in on especially that part of the Constitution when I'm working with the young people and any of the community members that I'm working with in Orange. So it really is an anchor for us, you know, while we're doing all of this work in the community. So that's how I feel it affects, or how it relates to the work that I do.
Excellent. Justin, let's go to you.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because when I first think of the word Constitution, the first thing that comes to my mind is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we all know that is not that is not in the Constitution. Spoiler alert for anybody who didn't know that, but that is the Declaration of Independence, who you know, that was written by Thomas Jefferson. And excuse me, my assistant, who's 15 months old, is with me right now. But you know, I think really when I compare like the Declaration, which I think is something that we often, you know, repeat and include in speeches, and when I think about, you know, the Constitution, you know, that President James Madison, you know, authored, you know, the Constitution like does something, right? You know, the Declaration says something, but the Constitution does something, and what it's doing, I mean, especially, you know, centuries later, for me, is protecting my rights. It's the reason I'm able to sit with you all today as someone who's, you know, the great grandson of enslaved Virginians. I think, you know, about, you know, the framers of the Constitution, and with all of their wisdom, they still knew that they were imperfect, right? They included a mechanism so that this document could be a living document and it could change with time. And so when I think about the Constitution, the things that I'm proudest of are the amendments that have helped, you know, really shore up my rights as someone who, you know, initially was never in the imagination of the original framers. And so, you know, when I think about the Constitution, it is this document that does something, and the thing that it does is it allows me to live in this society, to move as I would want to move, you know, to be able to, you know, have my daughter here with me. It's the thing that helps shore up these rights that I've come to really cherish, and I know, you know, just a generation ago I may not even have.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anna, same question to you.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think obviously the Bill of Rights is hugely impactful. The Constitution as a whole, and like Danny and Justin have both said, you know, and the deep effects on how it affects everyday life. As far as the arts and the work that we do at the Art Center, you know, art is a form of expression. It's a form of speech. So that First Amendment right that is right in there, that is crucial. You know, the fact that artists have the right to express themselves without fear of reprisal. I mean, well, they get held responsible for the things that they say in their art, but that there's not going to be, you know, a punishment for saying from the government, from expressing yourself. And this has been something that has been fundamental throughout societies. You know, artists are often ones who are bringing up, you know, things in society that may not be comfortable for everyone to hear, but are absolutely crucial. It is a form of expression that is part of being human, and our Constitution allows for that.
I think that's really important to think about how when we think about a document like the Constitution, Justin's point of it changing through time, and then Anna and Danny, you're really pointing out ways in which it's changed, whether it's through, you know, the artist pushing, having us think about things differently, or, you know, through youth activism, through organizations like yours, Danny, that to kind of push these changes in our country to make it this living, breathing, growing document. And I think that's really the power of a lot of what these, the overlap of what you all are doing. So one of the words that we threw out a lot in sort of this introduction, or as we talk about this kind of work, is civic engagement. So that's a word that gets thrown, or a term that gets thrown around a lot, but you know, for our audience, what does that mean? What does that mean to you? What does that mean for your work? And I'm going to just kind of throw it out there if anybody wants to jump in on this. I'm looking at you.
Okay,
Dan.
I'll jump in. So civic engagement is, and we've mentioned this before, just us, it's this, what we're doing right here, right now. It's people in a community coming together from different facets of the community to find a common ground to be able to make changes in that community that will benefit everybody. It's civic engagement is learning about the people who are the leaders in your community, who have the power to make the change that you want to see. It's about creating relationships with those people, even if you're just, it's not you're just, but being a resident and having no, connection to anything and anyone as far as community wise. So if you're just here and you're going to work and you're coming home, you don't feel like you're connected. It really is just as simple as picking up the phone and calling, your local government to get connected. I mean, civic engagement, civic action is understanding that there are avenues and there are ways, there are processes already in place that are available to us, that we have access to, that can help us to see and to be a part of the change that is happening in our communities, or that we want to see happen in our communities. It's learning who those people are, letting them learn you, understanding your common goals for the space that you move through and you live in, and working together with all of your unique gifts and everything that you can add to the table. All of us have something that the other doesn't, and that's the point. Right? It's like a big old pot of delicious stew with all the seasonings in it. That's civic engagement. That is civic engagement. To me, that's how I see it in my head. That's the way that I convey it to the young people that I work with, and to anybody in the community that I work with. That's exactly how I move through it. And I wasn't connected before I started getting civically engaged. I became connected. I made the way, and it's there. There's access. You just have to be inspired to find those ways.
I love what you said there about just informing people about systems, showing that there's ways, giving people skills of how to do this, because that's not partisan, right? So I think often when people talk about civic engagement, there's a fear that there's a partisan political agenda. And really what we're talking about here is access to knowledge, access to information, and access to ways to have your voice be heard. And I think that relates really well to another kind of term that we used in our description here was, and Anna, I'm going to go to you on this one. What is the democratization of art? We think of democracy, capital D, we live in a democracy, but what does democracy and democratization mean in your world?
Well, for me, I mean, I think, and what immediately comes to mind hearing Danny and what she's just said, I think about, I think many people saw this, right? Shepard Fairey, he was known for making the posters for Obama Hope, but he is also known for doing very large scale murals in communities that are just about voting, that are just about rights, right? Like the need for people to get involved. And so that's one part of how art is part of this. Artists can be part of the advertising, putting things out in the mainstream, meeting people where they are, and speaking a visual language that's easy for everyone to, like, you can see it and it will speak to you, regardless of where you are from. And maybe it only has one word in it: vote, right? So that's very direct right there. And it's nonpartisan. Again, it's vote. It's not vote for who. It's just go do it. And that's one way that art can make a difference here. But it also, comes back in my work when I think about who gets to, right? Like, who gets to make art? Who gets to write vote? And the way that someone like Shepard Fairey is going to present that is going to be very different from the way maybe somebody from our community would put that, or, you know, just because of geographic location, or just because of where they grew up, or how they grew up, or the color of their skin. You know, all of these things tie into how an artist is going to express themselves. So as part of what I do with the Art Center is I try to find ways to reach out to different people in our communities, really thinking about, like you said, access, right? And finding ways to break down those barriers so that something like funding, right? Or the ability to get art supplies, those aren't getting in people's way of having their voices heard, because every citizen of the United States has a right to have something to say, to stay informed, to be involved, right? These are core to everything that we need to do in our communities. And so that's a lot of what I think about. How can we make it possible for everyone to have a way to use the platform that we provide, which is really all about facilitating getting those messages out without really focusing on what they are, you know, and enabling people to transcend those barriers.
Excellent. I love that who gets to question, and you and I have certainly talked about this in the past, but I think it relates really well to also who gets to tell history, who gets to tell the stories of the past. And it makes me think of what Justin was starting, even talking about the Constitution and who gets to make those decisions of who's included. So I kind of want to throw the ball to you, Justin, here, and talk a little bit about how that who gets to idea that affects cultural resources, heritage resources, and historic resources.
Right. You know, I would really just want to echo everything that Anna said and then apply it to public history and you know, other cultural resources. And I, you know, very much consider you know, public art, right, as a part of our cultural resources. It does come back to the question of who, and there's a lot of power in storytelling. And we know that from much of our history, the stories that have been told, the stories that have dominated our kind of broader consciousness as a nation have been told by a very select group of individuals. And so when we talk about, you know, democratizing this work, is really kind of critically examining who were historically left out of those decisions when it comes to our monuments, when it comes to the textbooks that are in schools, when it comes to the research that is being used. We see that women and people of color have been left out for so many centuries. And this democratization process is an effort to redress those past inequalities. And I think we're seeing that. I mean, we're seeing it all over the country. We're seeing it at Montpelier, and you know, the changes that Montpelier has been experiencing in its leadership. That is a democratization of how, you know, this really important heritage site is stewarded, and the democratization is including those descendant voices in that stewardship. And so I'm really just repeating Anna. I feel like I think she really perfectly summed it up. You know, when we talk about public history, again, thinking about who was historically left out, and if we're truly to live out our values, you know, as a democratic society, then it means that we truly need to have everyone involved in making those decisions.
And I think that's really important, because that in a lot of ways then loops right back to Danny, because so often people that are left out are people under the age of 18, right? Are the young people. And so Danny, I kind of want to just transition to a little bit, kind of staying in this lane of this idea of who gets to, but also, you know, when we're talking about what are the role of young people, how do they figure out to find their place of they get to, but what are the, you know, special challenges or rewards of working with kind of engaging specifically young people in the community and getting them involved?
So the challenges, I would say, well, gosh, there's so much to say. First, I'll say that the young people under the age of 18 have been left out, but for the last couple of years, they have made their voices very well heard, not just in our community, but all over the country. I would dare say, even across the pond, all over the world. The last few years, we've seen like the young people community be ignited by things that I would say even in my generation, we just never even thought of or considered or gave another look to. For some reason, the young people in our day and age are paying attention. They're paying a lot of attention, and it's different because it's not that we're forcing them to, they're doing it on their own. So the problem is that they are young people, and young people need advocates until they turn 18, because they don't have the power of the vote yet, which is, the best way for us to be able to help in making decisions and getting our voices heard is to cast our vote. And they don't have that opportunity just yet. So one of the challenges with the young people has been that they felt like no one would listen to them, and they didn't know where to start. They didn't know the processes. They didn't know about access. They didn't know. So I found myself and two my co-founders, Laura and Sully, we found that if we kind of gave them a space where we could share with them the ways that they can get their voices heard, and we take them to that space, to those doors where they could knock, and we open that door for them, and we push them through and say, don't say what you want to say. We got you. We're right here. We give them that encouragement and that sense of empowerment, that then they could go ahead, and even though they're not 18 years old, they can still present to a town council or to the board of supervisors and share ideas or plans that they want to see happen in their community for themselves that would benefit them, their young people community. The challenge, like I said, was that they didn't really, there aren't very many spaces where they have people to turn to in that way. I feel like, what we're doing with Just Orange is really unique in that we're not any, we have no real titles other than we're just residents of Orange, we're parents. We have kids that have gone through the school system, and we cared, and we saw kids who wanted to find a way, who needed to be kind of guided and shepherded. Is that a word? Shepherded? Anyway, you know what I mean. We saw that there was an opportunity to kind of grab those kids up and help them to find their way. The whole way, never, ever trying to impose any of our own beliefs or any of our own, opinions about things that are going on in the world or society, or giving them just an opportunity to look around their community, where they stay, and decide what it is that they want to see happen as they grow through this community. And when we decide what it is they want to see, then we'll go and present those ideas to the people who can make those things happen in real life. And that is the type of stuff that we're doing with the young people. So the challenge was that they really didn't have a civic group or a space that they were doing something like that. And so I feel like we were able to create a space. And so we're helping to usher these kids throughout Orange County, opening up a bunch of doors and telling them to go in. And they're doing it, and it's amazing. I mean, we were just at Montpelier this past weekend, and I had those youth ambassadors on that panel in such a very important room, and they felt very important, and they got to speak their voice, and they got to share their perspectives, and they got to do it to a room filled with really, really important people. In fact, they were sitting on the stage with some really, really important people, decision makers. And so we're, building those connections between the young people and that part of our community, so that they get a chance to be a part of those conversations and give input on the decisions that are finally made.
Amazing. And I think it's so amazing to kind of see a need in your community and put the work in to fill that need. Justin, I want to transition to you here and just kind of talk a little bit more about your background and your knowledge about, again, youth activism, but from the civil rights movement.
Yeah, I'm just getting so excited hearing Danny describe what it is she's doing, with young people, because For me, most of my career has focused on civil rights history and specifically youth activism in the civil rights movement. I think it's so often overlooked. And Danny, what you're doing is what I would often emphasize when I was welcoming young people to the historic site where I previously worked. I think we do a disservice to young people when we don't teach them a deeper, fuller civil rights story. We often emphasize, the ministers and, just the individuals who had high profiles in this movement. And when we do that, students aren't often seeing themselves in this important work. But the story that I would often focus on was really here in Virginia, where we had students in Farmville, not too far from Orange, right in Prince Edward County, in 1951, Black students who were sitting in an overcrowded high school, Moton High School, and these students decided to do something about it. Here they were in this segregated, underfunded, under-resourced school built for 180 students. It had 500 students, and they're learning about equal protection under the law, right? They're learning about the Constitution, and yet here they are, their reality does not add up to the very kind of civic ideals that are being taught to them in the classroom. And these young people decided to do something about it. They went on strike, which we've seen students all this week take a stand and walk out. And these students in 1951 went on strike for 2 weeks in protest of the school's conditions. But then I think something that is just really critical, and I think it's important for young people to know, and this is, Danny, what I'm hearing you teach these students. In 1951, when these students went on strike, that wasn't the end of their civic engagement. They understood that there was a legal process. They understood that there were multiple ways to really challenge the status quo and to affect positive change. And so, in addition to going on strike, they called attorneys. They decided that they were going to file, a lawsuit with these attorneys after,
because there's work. I'm sorry to interrupt, but just on that, there's work to be done after.
Yes, exactly.
The strike is the action, right?
Right.
And that's your first.
Right.
That's your first telling how you feel and speaking your voice. But then now you done told everybody what you want to see and what you want to do. Now the work comes, and it takes time. It's not just that 2 weeks. It's not just that. Takes time.
And that's key. And the time, and I'm glad you said that, because you're reading my mind now, because again, the understanding that a lot of young people have around organizing and activism, and it's from the media, from the documentaries and the images, and they see the direct action, the protest, but they don't see all the behind the scenes work and how long it takes. And so in addition to direct action, there's litigation, right? There's legislation, the voting and the policy changes that have to take place at local, state, and federal level. Those are the levers of power, in this kind of constitutional democracy, right? That young people really need to understand in order to affect change. And these students in 1951, they did that. They went to the courts. It took several years, but finally they won in the Brown decision. I think it's important for young people to know, especially here in Virginia, that when we talk about Brown v. Board of Education, it wasn't just Topeka, Kansas. It was these students here in Virginia who made up most of those plaintiffs, and they had that strategy, that very strategic way of thinking, and they knew something else I think I've heard tonight already. They knew that they needed they needed intergenerational coalition. They sought out mentors, they sought out wisdom and advice. They weren't acting alone, but they were trusted adults that they could also turn to for support, and they received that.
Anna, one of the things, this is really exciting, and one of the things I'd love to bring in, because the Arts Center has been such an important place in this community, it's often been a place for the young people of Orange to come to and express themselves in a different way. So can you talk a little bit about how, your work also is providing access for these young people to speak back in a different platform and in a different way?
Okay. And honestly, one of the biggest things that we encourage with young people, and it kind of comes back to a fundamental misunderstanding about art. A lot of people believe and will tell their children, and I heard it growing up. I had very supportive parents who always encouraged me to learn more about art and explore my creativity. But, there were always the jokes about, okay, you're going to be a starving artist. And coming back, and leading this organization that I benefited from directly as a young person, I hear that echoed a lot. And I hear from young people, they'll say something like, well, my parents don't want me to be an artist because they want me to be able to afford to live. And one of the things that I say to them is, first of all, rude. Second of all, second of all, being an artist touches so much more. To think of it just as painting canvases is to reduce it to something. And I personally believe that there is an intention behind reducing human creativity and that expression to painting on canvases. Not to say that painting on canvases is invalid. I'm sitting here with a painting degree. I love painting on a canvas. But the things that you learn by exploring your creativity, learning about materials, learning how to express yourself effectively, it's a form of communication, and it's one that can transcend barriers. I know I said that before in the other question, but it's a way that people can express their internal world. And especially for young people who are really in these stages of trying to figure out who they are, who they want to be, and these very large choices that they have to make that are really going to guide their futures. Exploring these things is not a waste of time. It's a way to kind of figure out who they want to be that also creates new pathways. You meet different people who think differently from you. I know that often people also believe that artists are all these like incredibly progressive or have these very specific views, and that's simply not true. Artists have all kinds of ideologies, all of them are valid, and there are all kinds of ways that artists can express their opinions. And what's really great about visual art in particular, but this also applies to music, dance, any of the arts, is that you can find a way to communicate things, whether those are your feelings or things that you're passionate about, or maybe you want to have a conversation with other people, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to write that out or say it to them in a way that they would understand. The visual element of all of these art forms allows you to kind of create a bridge with another person and find that common ground. So even if you couldn't articulate it with speech, you can find another way. And that's the value of it, especially for young people. But it also at the Art Center creates opportunities for those intergenerational relationships that are so important, because that's the other piece. Young people have a lot to learn. They don't have all the facts. They haven't had those experiences. And so when we talk about people guiding, being mentors, one of the ways that I see artists do this all the time with younger people is by sharing a little bit about art, because when you paint something, it's personal, it's coming from you, your internal space. And to be able to teach a technique to somebody, you're giving them a glimpse into that world and how you feel about things. And then you get to watch them. I'm going to use the painting as an example. You get to watch them try to recreate that, and it's always going to be different. There's no way for it to be a perfect copy. So it's a great way to kind of bridge differences. And it's also an exploration so that people can get more in touch with how they really feel and work through their own kind of biases and concepts, and also share them with others.
I think that's really amazing. I'm going to quick pull an audience question that we have that I think just fits in really nicely here. And I think, Danny, you might be able to answer this for us. One of our audience members, Pandora Johnson, asks, what are some of the specific concerns young people want to see change in their community? So what are you seeing the young people of Orange want to see changed?
Let me unmute. Okay. Oh my gosh. Right now, I can talk like in general. I can talk like right this moment. I'll share from my perspective, just moving through Just Orange and the stuff that we're working on. The young people in my community, one of the things that I know that they want to see change is they want a space for themselves. They want a space where they can go and hang out and have a good time and not have to travel all the way to Charlottesville or Fredericksburg. They want a space where they can just be, where they could maybe explore the arts, explore, some extracurricular activities, just a space where they can just go and it's just for them. So I know that just within the group that I'm working with right now, that is something that we're really looking forward to working with other community members who have been working tirelessly for the last few years to see something like that happen for them. Another thing I think that the young people want to see, and I say this very humbly because I don't ever want to speak for anybody else or be the voice of anybody other than Danny Rivera, but just in my conversations with them and just through the things that I'm seeing, I know that the young people want to have more of a say in their educational experience. They're really fighting hard to work with the school for them to be able to have that power of, or that right for them to have a say in the decision making when it affects them. That's a platform right there where, it's an opportunity, and the young people have been taking this opportunity to exercise those rights that they have, even though they're not 18 years old. They're still citizens of the United States of America. So they are taking advantage of that right to be able to express themselves and tell the community leaders what it is that they want to see for themselves in their community, in their educational experience. So right now the young people are fighting for space. That's basically, I feel like that's all encompasses where they're fighting for space. They're fighting for a room, a seat at the table. They're fighting for folks to take them seriously and to not write them off just because they're 16 years old or even 10. I have 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds in our group who have really valid points and have ideas that are really could be really viable if we, put our heads together and make things work. So they're fighting for space. They're fighting to be heard. They want to be heard. They want to have a chance to be a part of the decision making, especially when it comes to their experience and their future.
So it sounds like they want the same things we all want. A seat at the table, some power in making the decisions that affect us on a daily basis.
And to know that they matter, right? And everybody wants to know that they matter.
I think that's so important, and that's such a universal thing to think about. So thinking about these, the work that you all do is all very unique and you come from different places, but what advice do you have for people that are trying to get involved in their communities, that want to see changes, that, they want to do engagement in their community, but they don't know where to start? So what would you say to somebody like that, Danny?
I'll just tell you what I did. I mean, I started at ground zero, and that's how I've gotten here 2.5 years. I went to the spaces where I saw people gathering, and I listened. And to the folks who were speaking that sparked some feeling inside of me that was positive, I went up to them and I introduced myself and I said, my name is Danny and I want to help some way. How can I help? I started to research and look online, like social media groups, just community, local ones, where I could see that there's some people that I know in there. And I asked them, what's this about? And I just left myself. You open yourself up. You open yourself to meeting whoever you need to meet in order to become a part of those conversations. To be civically engaged is totally an action word. Like you have to go. No one's gonna knock on your door and say, hey, I want to hear your opinion about something. It's not gonna happen. You need to decide within yourself that you want to be a positive, productive contribution to your community. And then you find people who are doing the same thing. And when you live in a community as small as ours, and if you've lived here for 5+ years, I have friends who came here a year ago and they plugged in immediately. So it really just depends on your desire to want to be civically engaged. If you want to do it, you're going to find your way. You're going to find the pathway to do that. And like I was saying, in such a small town like this, it's really easy because we're all, I mean, we're so right here. We're so right here. We cross paths all day, the same streets. I mean, one grocery store. It's like, it's not hard. It's not hard to be civically engaged. You could tap into any one of us on this call right now, and we could connect you to 20 other people. And then that's how it starts. It's just like that. It's connection, but you have to make the connection. You have to plug in if that's what you so desire.
Excellent. Thank you. Anna, what about you?
Well, I mean, I think that there are lots of opportunities, and Danny said, yes, that's true. In our community, it's easy, but it's also hard. It can be very intimidating. And so I can understand when people don't feel like they have an entry point as well. And, you know, having lived in New York City, which I can just say is a series of small communities that are all pushed together, that dynamic still exists. So it doesn't matter if you're in a big community or a small community. I would say that for people who want to try to find ways to get engaged with their community, then the best thing to do is to listen, to learn, kind of what Danny said. Put yourself in places where people are gathering and then open yourself to those experiences. You know, we all kind of have a tendency to enter a room and say, you know what, I can participate. I can bring something to this table. And I think that that's a noble kind of thing. You want to bring value when you join a group, but there is a huge value in kind of taking a beat and trying to see where the group has needs, whether that group is a small town or a big city or whatever that group is doing. Like, there are just so many different examples. And so there's always going to be a way where the person who listens and takes time to participate is going to learn what is needed and find out often that they can bring something to the table or that they know someone else. And so I think it kind of comes from a place of like, people engage in these conversations wanting to add value, wanting to participate. If you get the urge to be part of your community, that's kind of something common that I see. And I just say to people, you know, it's take a minute, listen, you know, try to see what people are talking about and where you can fit in. But it's kind of like any other activity. And I know that, you know, once you kind of get through it, it's funny, youth have a place where they're guaranteed to meet other people. Whereas once you're an adult, it can actually be harder because you don't have those guaranteed places. You have your work and you have home, you have church, you know, but you may not have another space. And so the nice thing about a place like the Art Center is that we kind of present a neutral territory. So whatever your ideology is, whatever interests you, whatever skills you have, there's gonna be a way to kind of meet people on an even footing. And everybody can contribute to that. And so that's why, you know, we do a lot of things where we have open jam sessions or we have free clubs or we have stuff like that, that really anybody could drop in and, hey, sometimes you find your people and sometimes you don't, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't come back and keep trying. You know, it happens slowly. And when it happens, you will find your path to being part of your community, but there's always a door.
Excellent. Thank you. I think your emphasis on listening it is so important, right? No, not everybody needs to come reinvent the wheel, but somebody's got to connect the wheel to the axle to the other wheel. So Justin, sort of the same question to you, what advice do you have, or what would you say to somebody who wants to get involved and get engaged in their communities and do this kind of work? What would you say to them? How would you advise them to do that?
Yeah, I think a lot of good advice has already been shared, but again, the listening, I think is so key. And then I would say, you know, look around you first. I think there's this tendency to, you know, immediately be on the National Mall, right? You know, like leading the next, you know, demonstration, or you know, there's so much that is happening in your immediate vicinity. I know for me, you know, I've been in my neighborhood for 3 years now, and I'm really involved in my neighborhood association. And I feel like I'm mostly listening. You know, there are residents who've lived here much longer than I have, and I think there's just a lot of wisdom that I can gain from you know, being an attentive, active like, I mean, an active listener. But then there are also moments where I know that, you know, there are things that I can contribute. You know, for example, you know, there was a historically Black church that was threatened in our neighborhood, and because I have, you know, a background in cultural resource policy, I was able to bring that to, you know, the conversation, and we were able to convince the Planning Commission to designate that property as an individually protected property so that it isn't threatened by demolition. That wasn't me kind of jumping to the front of the room saying, you know, I know all the answers, but, you know, by listening closely and not simply, you know, trying to dictate, you know, what I felt should be done, you know, I was able to see, okay, here's an opportunity where, you know, I truly have something to contribute. I have a skill that I can bring to the table that will help, you know, benefit the common cause. And so, you know, for me, it's really those two things, you know, being able to listen first, but then also, you know, really focusing on, you know, your immediate surroundings, because that's where you can have, you know, the biggest impact.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things I love about this panel is the real, like the local focus, that even though we're talking about very much like Central Virginia, our area where we all live, these same rules apply across the country when you sort of think locally and you think in your neighborhoods, in your backyards, in your neighbors' backyards. So I'm going to ask you all kind of one more question and then start to go to questions from the audience. So I see some questions are starting to populate the chat, but if audience members, if you have questions, please feel free to add them to the chat. But my last big question for you is also one sort of asked by the audience, is what big projects do you have going on, or what's something exciting that maybe you just unveiled to the entire town? I'm looking at you, Anna, to maybe kick us off. But what are the big projects, or what are the activities? What special events are going on in your area of community engagement? Anna, let's start with you.
Sure. So big project. Well, we have literally this past weekend on Saturday completed a very large mural project here in the town of Orange, where we actually got a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. It was a Challenge America grant to fund the creation of these 3 murals. We had an open call process. We had community members as part of a selection panel, and we brought 3 artists from outside of our community to come in and work with local artists and volunteers to create some truly monumental, I mean, I think one of the pieces is 60 feet long, monumental artworks for Orange. And to create those, we did have public comments. So we encouraged people to get involved. And 2 of them were created using a very open process where people submitted comments. And then the final one was created based off of feedback that we'd received, as well as the building owner's input. And they were all created with the help. We had over 50 volunteers, which for our community is a pretty big number, to come out and be part of this project. And I mean, the results are just, I mean, I'm a fan, you know? And so to see something so large and so different come up in our community, and each of the murals are completely different. One is very, well, they're all very bright, but one of them is on our ceramic studio, and it shows ceramic vessels. And so we had ceramic artists being part of that, you know, so that was cool to see people kind of try out a different medium, right, and paint something on the space that they use. You know, the second one, it ended up going on the train tracks on the back of a fine art framer, and it is a dogwood tree with cardinals and Blue Ridge Mountains, and it is so Central Virginia, and it just ended up in exactly the right place with the perfect imagery for our area. And knowing that people are going to be able to come on that train, even though the train does not stop in Orange, we're hoping that people see it and they say, wait, that's a town I need to go back and visit. What's going on over there? Because it really was a community effort. And then the final mural was just this big abstract design. It's called Hatch Me a Dream. And you know, that's what it's about. It's about dreams. It has stars and galaxies, and it's full of potential. And to be able to have, you know, we had Boys and Girls Club kids help out with this. We had adults. We had, I mean, I think our youngest volunteer was 2 years old, and our oldest volunteer was, you know, 76. So to have people of all ages joining in to create artwork that's going to last for years and that everybody can enjoy without having to pay an admission fee, you just get to do it. And, some people aren't going to love it, and that's okay. I encourage people who see these kinds of public art pieces, it's meant to start a conversation. It's meant to make you think. It's meant to make you engage, right? And so for anybody who sees those murals and is like, you know what, I don't like that, I want a different mural, do it. Get engaged, bring people together, make it something that everybody can be part of. And I promise you, it's going to be more effective, it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to be something that reflects your community. And that's absolutely what we saw with our 3 murals. And the process kind of lasted 9 months once we got the announcement about the grant. So it's kind of like we had a baby. We had triplets. And the artists Rick Nickel, Juan Pineda, and Kim Carlino were absolutely amazing in working with our community. And that's the other thing, is that I think that people often think that artists are kind of set in what they want to do, but that's the great thing about art, is that it does require a certain flexibility. And so part of this project was working with the community, and the artists all did that to such beautiful effect.
Absolutely.
Can I just add something, and it inspired something in me. I'm thinking about this concept of placekeeping, right? We often hear people talk about placemaking, but to me it's the placekeeping that's even more critical, in ensuring that local residents, community members have the ability to retain those aspects of their local culture that engender that sense of pride and connection, and rootedness. And I think when we talk about civic engagement, it's that sense of people say place attachment. It's that connection you feel to your community, to your hometown, that inspires that type of civic involvement. And so what I see Danny and Anna doing are so intimately connected, right? Because these murals are engendering this sense of connection, right? It's engendering this pride and this love of home that then fosters the desire to be civically involved and to improve the community. And hopefully, I think especially for rural communities, I grew up in a small town, not see the only option as leaving. There's also the option of leaving and returning and investing and pouring in the energy to help improve things as well. So all that connects in my mind. And so I'm really just kind of appreciating this dynamic that I'm hearing tonight, despite all the crying and the baby chaos and all stuff. I'm actively listening, and I'm feeling really inspired.
No, I think that's really amazing, and I think you're exactly right of making these communities places that aren't just about leaving, but are about coming back and feeding into it, like Anna's done, like you've done, coming back. Danny, what projects, what activities, what big things are going on with your group right now?
So I'm again, just like Justin, and I'm just loving this conversation so much, because it's really my wheelhouse. It's really absolutely what I'm doing, what I'm so inspired to do every day, especially with these young people in my community. We have 2 really big things going on for us right now. Well, let me say this just to tie in what Justin said about and what Mary and Anna said about not just wanting people to leave, but that you want them to come back and feel a sense of pride. So with Just Orange, my very first youth ambassador, his name is O'Brien Martin. He's my very first, we call it, the young people in our group are called youth ambassadors. And that's what they are, right? So they are the spokespeople for their community. That's why I say I don't speak for them. I would really love to see more of them be invited to panels like this, because I would love to have everyone really hear their perspectives. And just that's my job, making the spaces for the kids. I'm going to plug them in real quick. So so please invite them. Anyway, our first youth ambassador, O'Brien Martin, he joined us 2.5 years ago when we started the group. Laura, Sully, and I, the co-founders of our group. And throughout that 2.5 years, we opened up opportunities for him for public speaking engagements. We had him do all kinds of events from Greene County, Madison County. He was up there speaking about his place and what the youth want to see in their communities, and just speaking on behalf of the youth in his community. And throughout those 2 years, the first 2 years, I remember telling him, having conversations with him and saying to him, Brian, you don't have to, what we're trying to do here with Just Orange is trying to show you guys to kind of invest in this community, take a stake. This is your community. You're growing up here. You were born and raised here. You can go see the world and go get educated and all that great stuff. But then you can come back here. You can come back here and bring all the stuff that you've learned and the love that you have for this space. And then you can become a leader in this community. And then you can be the one making the real decisions and helping and remembering how you came up. And don't forget about the young kids that are coming behind you. And he was like, yeah, Danny, you're right. We had so many conversations about that. And I'm getting goosebumps a little because, so he goes away to Virginia Tech. He's in Virginia Tech now. And he calls me up earlier this year, and he has this idea for a business that he wants to open up in Orange. And he shares with me that he wants to do a haunted attraction, business. The haunted attraction industry is really big right now with the young people, and he wanted to do it. And so he came over to my house, and my husband and I talked to him, and we talked for a few weeks about it back and forth, and he wanted our help basically to do it. So we ended up helping him to do that. And so O'Brien is a young person who left our community and then has decided to come back and become a business owner in our community. He's a member of the Chamber of Commerce for Orange. He's a member of the Chamber of Commerce in Culpeper as well. He is having meetings with the chief of police and town council folks so that he can get his permits to do his haunted attraction. He's meeting with local business leaders to get venues so that he can do the haunted attraction. He is launching this haunted attraction next month, and he's 19 years old. He's a CEO of his own company in Orange. He is exactly it. He's it. He was our very first one, our very first youth ambassador. He's come back. And so what's so beautiful about that is talking about community engagement and civic engagement. It's the partnerships that we are creating with other entities in collaboration with this young person. So we're partnering with Anna in the Art Center, and we're going to have folks go over that way to the Art Center, and she's going to have folks come up over our way. When we're doing this whole project for in October with the haunted attraction, we've actually collaborated with the Art Center of Orange to do work in the same lines. So that is, you got this kid, what I'm saying? It's coming back, and he's doing this, and that's the point of all of this. And none of this is partisan. None of this has to do with anything. None of that. I just hate all of it. It has nothing to do with that. We're simply showing these kids the process. This is the process. And you have a say in that process. And maybe if illegally right this moment, you can't go and check the box and do, that doesn't mean that you still can't have an influence on decisions that are being made right now. Because you can. If you know how to present yourself, if you organize your thoughts and you get in front of the right people, they will listen. They will listen, and you can be a contributing member to this community. You don't have to leave, you can come back. And so that's what we're hoping to, to instill, and a gift that we're hoping to give to these kids. And again, O'Brien, doing what he's doing is just, to me, it's like, it just is, it's the young people, that are connected to this community. Because I feel like, you have to have a certain sense of connection to want to come back. And O'Brien just happens to be one of those young people that really loves Orange. So he felt, the stake. So I had to plug him in there really quick, just because I'm so proud of him. And that's what that's what we're doing. So one of our projects is that, well, that's not a Just Orange project, but I support my youth ambassadors. So that's his project that's coming up in October, Haunted Attraction in Orange. That's exciting. But as far as Just Orange is concerned, we have a trip coming up to Washington, D.C., to the Capitol. We're going as our Congresswoman's guests. I'm taking the entire team, Just Orange. Now, this is part of a 2-part series because I took the Just Orange team to our House of Delegates in Richmond as our delegates guests. Our delegate Nick Freitas invited us to come to the Capitol, and he wanted to show the kids around, and he put them up on a big screen and introduced him to, you know, the entire assembly. It was really cool. So now our Congresswoman has invited us to Washington, D.C., to the Capitol, and we're going to go and take the kids and do the same thing tour. I think the gallery is not open yet to the public still, so we're not going to be able to like be in there while they're voting and doing stuff. But we will meet with our Congresswoman, and she'll hang out with us for a little while, and then we'll take the kids on a tour, and we're going to feed them. You know, hopefully everything works out. We're trying to make it all work. You know, it takes moolah to do all that stuff. So we're working hard to make sure that the kids are fed, but that they have this experience. So this is it, showing them, connecting them, giving them that opportunity to see the pathway, to see it themselves, to walk it. And it's nonpartisan. It doesn't matter. Whoever your leaders are, doesn't matter who they are. You need to make a relationship with them. You need to have them listen. You need to let them know what it is that you want to see in your communities. It doesn't matter what political party they belong to. If they're your representative for your area, then it would be in your best interest to form a relationship with them. And we have formed a relationship with our delegate. We formed a relationship with our Congresswoman, and we've done a lot of work with both of them over the last 2.5 years. So it's really exciting. I'm really proud about that. As far as like the whole partisan thing, I'm really proud to stand on that. I'm really, it's important for me that no one tries to define who Just Orange is, that they understand that we are a youth civic group. That's it. We are just that. We're a youth civic group. No, you know, we don't talk about, we don't care about all that stuff.
I think that's really great, and it's really exciting to see that. We're almost at the end of our session, but I just wanted to give a moment kind of to any of our panelists, if there's a final thought you'd like to share with the audience, or a final idea, some theme that you want them to take away from tonight's discussion. And I'm gonna go to Justin first, and then Anna and Danny, just to put you on the spot, Justin.
Oh no, it's great. You know, what I'm really, you know, thinking about right now and inspired about right now is this focus on the local. And I know this is a panel that's looking at, you know, local civic engagement, but I think it's so important to know that what happens at the local level can have a ripple effect that reverberates across the state, reverberates across the nation. You know, the students that, you know, I've focused most of my work as a public historian were simply protesting for a new school. And then they went to court, and they went to the state courts, and they lost at the state courts, and they, you know, appealed, and then, you know, ended up this is the Supreme Court, right? I mean, it's this level, you know, tiered system of government that we've inherited that I think is so important for young people to understand, you know, how it works, you know, the process. So Danny, when I hear about you taking students to Richmond, but also taking them to DC, and then having them be involved in, you know, local government, like that's it. Like that's what we need. We need this understanding of all tiers, but recognize that, you know, we have to focus on our backyard first. That's where we can really put in a lot of work and see some pretty significant effects pretty early on. And, you know, and congratulations on the National Endowment for the Arts. I hope folks recognize how huge of an accomplishment that is. You know, as someone who works under the National Endowment for the Humanities, which is the sister agency of the NEA, that's extraordinary, and something that, you know, you and the entire community should just really feel proud about. That's huge. Yeah.
Thank you. My paperwork starts now.
Right, there's the federal grant. Sorry, that could be, but congrats all the same.
Mhm.
Yeah, Anna, any sort of final thoughts or ideas you want people to walk away with from today?
Yes, I mean, I think that, you know, kind of to take off on the mural project, but it's in all of the things that we do when we involve our community and bring artists or work with our local artists to create these opportunities. And one of the things that I really think of art, I talked about it being a form of communication a lot. And one of the things that I hold in my heart about it is that an artwork is a love letter to the future, right? So an artist creates something and it may be how they feel today, but they're often also thinking about the future, about what that artwork, and often, I mean, think about the artworks that you have seen in your life, think about those very famous artworks. What could you possibly today have in common with Rembrandt, but did his work not speak to you? And so I think that that's one of the powers of art. It communicates across time and across culture to make these statements. And we have an amazing opportunity when we explore creativity in our communities to not only make statements about who we are as a community today, but who we want to be, and to kind of find a collective voice that can really express the complicated nature of us as humans.
I love that idea of art being a love letter to the future, and particularly in the context of this conversation about civic engagement, which is focused on shaping your own future, shaping the future of your community, shaping the future of your backyard. And I just think that's such a beautiful idea. Danny, any sort of final thoughts to take us home?
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody that our young people are watching us. They're watching every move we make, every word we speak, our facial expressions, body language, energy. They're paying attention to us extra these days. And so I think that it's really important for us as adults and mentors and guides and coaches, moms, teachers, all, the leadership to really understand that and mind the way that you move throughout your time on this earth, because the kids are watching, and if we want to have a better tomorrow, then we need to be the example today. And that's basically, what I stand on every day and what I do.
I think that's a really important idea. I just want to thank each of you for spending your evening with us tonight. This has been so inspiring. It makes me incredibly grateful to live in such an exciting community, a community that people really care about and want to be involved in and want to shape. And I hope for our audience members that live locally, they feel the same. And for those that from across the country, that you're inspired to take some of these ideas back into your own backyard and think about, how can I listen? How can I watch? How can I be of service? How can I help young people express themselves? How can I bring people together intergenerationally? I think there's so many great ideas that came out here. For our audience members as well, this was the final program of our Constitution Month celebration this year. But I'd like to let you all know that our previous programs are going to be available online probably within the next week. So the recordings of this will get sent out, but also recordings of previous programs are going to become available to you all. I also invite you to come see us at Montpelier, come in person, follow us on all the social media, but also we've celebrated Constitution Day for many years at Montpelier, and this is the first year we've celebrated Constitution Month, and it's definitely not going to be the last year. This is going to be a thing we do every year. So get inspired, get engaged, work in your community, and come back and see us again next September, and we'll get inspired all over again. So thank you again to the panelists, and thank you to the audience for being here. It's been a really great and inspirational evening.